Hi friends, welcome to Azure Content. This is part 21 in Azure Data Factory playlist. In this video, we are going to learn about decompression and compression of files using copy activity of ADF pipeline. So let's learn everything in details. So basically, compression and decompression means zipping and unzipping of files. So suppose there is a file in my local, okay, and it has around 100 KB of disk space, okay. So when I compress it by using zip format, so it gets compressed and the extension is .zip, okay. You might have done this in your local, and basically behind the scenes its disk size gets reduced to suppose 50 KB, okay. So I'm just taking an example. Let me show you the same in my local. If I go, so I have few files here. So you can see I have a sample file.csv, and if I see the property of this file, so the size of this file is 13 KB and the disk size of this file is 16 KB. Okay. So if I right click this file, you can see compress to zip file. And if I select that, it is creating a .zip folder, and inside this folder it contains the same file but in compressed version. Okay, so the data of this file would be the same, but if I see the properties, so now the compressed size is 3 KB. Okay, so earlier this file was 16 KB on disk and now it has been compressed to 3 KB. Okay, let me show you the data as well. So this is the compressed file data. So it has 2 columns and it has 1511 rows. Okay, now similarly if we see the original file, the data is same, as you can see, 2 columns and number of rows are 1511. Okay, so nothing happens to the data, but only thing is the size get reduced. So that's why it is called compressed file or compressed folder. Okay, so I hope you got the idea what is compression of file. And similarly, if we want to decompress this file, or that means if we want to unzip this file, we simply extract this file and select the path and it will be extracting the file. Okay, and if now we see the properties of this extracted file, so you can see the disk space is increased. Okay, now the question is how to achieve the same thing using ADF pipeline. Okay, so in ADF we can achieve the same thing using copy activity. So let me create a pipeline and let me drag a copy data activity here and let me select a source. I'm just selecting a dummy source right now, binary 1 and binary 2. Okay, so here in the source and sync dataset, let me open both the datasets. So we have this compression type option. Okay, in both the datasets we have this option. Okay, so if we have to unzip a file or folder, we have to make the selection of compression type in source dataset. Okay, so here we have lots of options. As you can see, we have bzip2, gzip, deflate, then zip deflate, tar gzip, and .tar. Okay, so if your input dataset is in .zip format, we need to select this, and we need to select this compression level as well. So we are going to talk about the same in the upcoming slides. So let's move ahead. So when we need to unzip the file, we need to specify the compression property in input dataset, and the copy activity will read the compressed data from source and decompress it. Okay, and similarly, if we need to zip the file or we need to compress a file into a zipped format, then we need to specify the compression property in the output dataset. Okay, we don't need to do anything in input dataset, but we need to select the compression option or compression type and level in output dataset when we need to zip the file. And once we run the pipeline with these selections, the copy activity will compress the file and it will write the data into the sync. Okay, so as we discussed, we have two things that we need to select. One is compression type and other one is compression level. Okay, so in compression type, we have various options as we have seen: gzip, deflate, bgzip2 and zip deflate. These are few of the options. And in compression level, we have two options: fastest and optimal. When we select fastest, the copy activity will try to complete the execution as quickly as possible. It will not bother about how precisely or how optimally the compression is done, but it will try to complete the execution as soon as possible. Okay, And the second option is optimal. So when we select the compression level as optimal, copy activity tries to optimally compress the data. That means even if it takes longer time, it tries to maintain the quality and it tries to make the compression as optimal as possible. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's try to see zipping and unzipping of files happening practically. Okay.
So in my storage account, I have these two containers called container 1 and container 2. Let me show you the content out of it. So in the container 1, we have few zipped files. Okay. So the first one, as you can see, which is directly inside the container, is company hierarchy.csv.gz. Okay. So this is the zipped file having .gz extension. So if I try to preview the data, you can see that it is fully encoded. So we cannot see what the content is. And similarly, I have a zipped folder called sample folder.zip. And if I try to see the content here as well, we cannot see anything. And this one is a folder which contains multiple files and all of them are zipped together. Okay. And apart from these two, as you can see, this is a folder inside the container. And if I open this folder, it contains multiple individual .zip files. Okay, so this file corresponds to, let me show you the other container. So each of those individual files corresponds to these individual .csv files. So let me go back. So first of all, as a part of demo, we are going to unzip all these zipped files. Okay, so basically we are going to decompress all the files. And for that, we are going to use copy activity. So let me create a pipeline and let me drag a copy activity. So the first thing that we are going to do is unzipping this .gz file. Okay, so let me try to create a source dataset pointing to that .gz file. Okay, so here let me try to select CSV and here let me point the dataset to container 1 and company hierarchy.csv.gz. And as we have discussed, in order to unzip the file or in order to decompress the file, we have to make the selection for compression property in input dataset itself. So in the source dataset, let me open the dataset. We have to select this compression type. And since our file is .gz format, so here we need to select .gz and the compression level. I can select any one of these. Let me go for fastest. And then let me try to create a sync dataset. Okay, so let me point to ADLS Gen 2 again and let me select CSV format. And for output, we have a container called container output. And here we do not have any content or any file present at this moment. So let me point the sync dataset to this container output. And let me uncheck this first row as header. Let me not import schema. And we don't need to do anything in the sync dataset. This compression type by default is none and we are not going to change anything there. Okay, let me go back here. And now if I hit on debug, what we are expecting is here in the output container, we will see the file in its extracted format, which means we can see the data there and it will be unzipped. Okay, so let me hit on debug. Let's wait for the execution to be completed. Yeah, so copy activity has completed successfully. Let's go back and let's hit on refresh for output container. So you can see now the file which was in .gz format has been unzipped and you can see the extension is just .csv. Earlier it was having .csv.gz. Let me show you that. So you can see it was .csv.gz and now if I try to preview the content, let's see. So you can see we are able to view all the records present in the file. Okay. Now with a similar approach, we need to unzip this sample folder.zip. Okay. So in order to do that, we just need to change this compression type. Instead of .gz, we have to select the type of the source file. Okay. So here our file or folder structure is .zip. So we need to select this zip deflate or .zip. So I'm selecting that and compression level I'm keeping as it is. And here let me point it to the sample folder.zip. Yeah, so done. So we are good in the sync. We don't need to do anything. We are expecting the output files to be coming in container output itself. Okay, so let me hit on debug. Let's go back and let's wait for the unzipped files to appear here after the copy activity completion. So yeah, so copy activity has completed successfully. Let's go back and let me hit on refresh. So you can see here it is showing us sample folder.zip. Okay, but if I open that, we can see all the unzipped files inside this. So we are having 3 files which were earlier zipped together in sample folder.zip. So don't go with the name. Here it is named as .zip, but it is actually unzipped folder. Okay. And if we compare it with the input file, let me open a duplicate tab. And here let me go back to the input. So here you can see the icon present. It is different than this one, right? This is the actual folder, so that's why it is coming as a folder icon. And earlier it was in the zipped file format. Okay, so if we tried to open the content here, we were not able to see anything. But now if we click on that, we can see all the contents or all the files which are now unzipped. Okay, so we can see the content within each of these files as well. So you can see we are able to preview the data in each of the files. Okay, so we are good. We are able to unzip this sample folder.zip as well, which contained 3 individual files. So we got the output inside a folder, right? Let me show you. So this folder contains all these 3 individual files. So suppose we don't want this coming inside a folder. We want all these 3 individual files coming directly inside the container. Okay. Then what we need to do is, let me first clear this output container and let me go back. So here we have an option called preserve zip file name as folder. So since this is checked by default, what it was doing is it was taking the zip file name from the source container and it was making a folder in the output container with the same name as the zipped file names. Okay. So if I uncheck this and if I hit on debug, we are expecting that all 3 files will be coming up individually, okay, instead of inside a folder. So now the copy activity has successfully completed. Let's hit on refresh. So you can see all these files are appearing individually instead of coming inside a folder. Okay. So this was possible because we unselected this preserve zip file as folder. Okay. So now let me again clear this and let's go back to container 1. So here we have a folder which contains individual zip files and I want to unzip all these files at once. So what I need to do is, let me first point the source dataset to this folder called zipped files and let me click on OK. And since all the files are in .zip format, so I'm good with the compression type as .zip. And now, since we need to process all these files together at once, instead of file path in dataset, I'm going to select this wildcard file path. And here I'm going to give a wildcard pattern to select all the files of .zip format. Okay, so here we do not have any other format of files, so we can give star directly, but in case you have multiple file formats, then you need to give star.zip. Okay, and in sync I don't need to make any changes. It is pointing to container output, so I'm good. Let me hit on debug and here we are expecting that all these 4 files will be unzipped at once and it will be appearing in the output container. So let's wait. Yeah, so execution is completed. Let's go back to the output container. Let's hit on refresh. So you can see all the 4 files which were in zip format has been unzipped. Let's check the content here. So we are able to preview the content as well. Let's check for this one as well. So we are good. So similarly, if you have any other format of zipped files, so you can select any of the file format from here, from this drop down, which contains multiple other formats. So if your source file is in .tar format, then you can simply select this one and you don't need to select anything in the sync file and it will simply unzip the zipped file. So we have seen a couple of examples for zipping of the files, so we are good with that. Now let me try to create another pipeline for compressing the files. So we have already seen decompression. Now we have to see the compression of files into zip format or any other format. Okay, so for this, we need to select the compression property in output dataset. So we are not going to touch the compression properties in input dataset, but we need to do that in output dataset. So let me try to create a pipeline, and I'm going to drag the copy activity again. And this time our requirement is in the container 2, we have few CSV files. Okay, so we are going to zip all these files into a single zipped file. Okay, so for that, let me create input dataset pointing to ADLS Gen 2. And here let me select CSV format. In file path, let me select the container which has all the CSV files. I'm not going to select first was header, or I'm not going to import schema. And since we have multiple files which we need to zip together, so here again we need to select this wildcard file path, and either we can give star directly or we can give star.csv. If you have any other file format of files, so here you can give star.csv. Okay, so it's better to mention the format as well, because in future you might have some other file extension here. So in order to avoid the risk of zipping those as well, you can just mention star.csv if you want to copy only CSV files. Okay, so in the sync, let me create dataset again pointing to output container. Let me select the file path. So currently we do not have anything in the output container, so we are good. Let me deselect all these options. And as we discussed, in order to zip the files, we need to make selection in the output dataset. So here in the sync, let me open the dataset and let me select the compression type as .zip. You can make the selection as per the requirement. I'm going ahead with .zip. In the compression level, I'm going to select fastest. And if you want to give any particular name to the zipped file, then you can mention here. Let me give the name as players.zip. Okay, so we are good. Let me go back here and let me hit on debug. So we are expecting that all these files will be zipped together into a single zipped file, and it will be present in the output container. Let's wait for the pipeline execution to be completed. Yeah, so execution is finished. Let's go back and hit on refresh. So you can see it has generated this players.zip file, and if I try to open the content, I'm assuming it will be encoded. Let's check. So you can see we cannot see any content here, but still we can see the file names. You can see india.batsman.csv, then england.batsman.csv, all of these 4 files. Okay, it has the content of it. Okay, so basically it is the zipped file of multiple files. Okay, so you can see all these 4 files has been zipped together into this players.zip file. So instead of zipping all these files together into a single zipped file, if I want them to be zipped individually, then what can we do? Let's check. So here in the copy activity, let's try to check. We have something called copy behavior, and if I use this preserve hierarchy option, will it be able to preserve the hierarchy, which means from the source, whatever hierarchy level of this file is, will it be maintained in the sync? Okay, so let's try to hit on debug and let's see if it works. So let's wait. So you can see the copy activity failed and it says user error zip copy behavior not supported. And if I read the message, it says copy behavior property is not supported if the compression type of sync is zip. So basically we cannot use this copy behavior property if the sync has to be zipped. Okay. So basically this copy behavior won't help. So then what we can do is we can create a full pipeline, which means we can use get metadata activity to get all the file names from this container. So let me create a dataset pointing to that folder. So we have this container 2. Let me hit on that. And then in the field list, I need to select this child item, what it will do is it will give the list of all the files present inside this container. Okay, so since our dataset is pointing to this container, so it's going to give the list of all these with this child item property. And then let me cut this copy activity, and I need to use for each activity in order to iterate through all these files which this get metadata is going to give. And then inside for each, I have to select this item. For that, I'm going to select this activity get metadata output dot child items. Okay, because child item property will give the name of each of the files. Let me show you that. Let me run this get metadata activity. So it's finished. Let's check the output. So you can see there's a property called child items which holds all the uh, file names present in the container. Okay, so you can see the complete data is coming. The 4 file names are coming correctly. And if you notice, the file names are coming in the property called name. Okay, so just remember that. So now in the for each, we are pointing to the output of get metadata activity, and we are actually pointing to this array called child item. Okay, how do I know that it is an array? Because you can see it has square bracket. Okay, so inside for each, the item should always be pointing to an array. So we are good with that. So inside this, I'm going to paste the same copy activity which we had cut from there. And in the source, instead of wildcard file path, I'm going to select this file path in dataset. And inside this dataset, I'm going to create a parameter for the file names so that it will take each of the file names individually. And I'm going to make it dynamic by parameterizing it. And here you can see this parameter is appearing here, which we just created in the dataset. And we need to give the value to this parameter. So what is the file name? Basically, we have to give here item dot name, because item is nothing but this child items. Okay, so this array is treated as items, and if we give item dot name, then for each of the instances it will take these file names, okay, one by one. So let me give item dot name here, item dot name. Okay, so we are good. And similarly in the sync dataset, I have to create the parameter. So let me do that. File name, let me remove this. And here in the file name, if I select dataset.filename, it will create the file name in the output as england.batsman.csv instead of england.batsman.zip. So in the output, we need actually the file names to be having .zip extension. So in order to do that, we have to first remove .csv file extension, and then we need to concat with .zip. Okay, so in order to do that, actually we do not have anything called rtrim. Okay, or in the trim also we cannot remove any string. It will only remove the white spaces. Okay, so what we can do is, in order to remove, we have something called replace. So what we can do is we can replace .csv and with blank string. Okay, so let me use replace function, and here I'm going to replace .csv with just a blank string. Okay, and then we are going to concat the whole thing with .zip. .zip. Okay, so we are expecting the file name will be england.batsman, and then .csv will be removed, and instead of that we will concatenate it with .zip. Okay, so we are good. So let's go back to the pipeline, and here in the sync again we need to provide the value. So again we need to give item.name. So we are good. So before running the pipeline, let me just make sure that the sync has proper selection of the compression level and compression type. So we are good. Let's hit on debug, and we are expecting, let me clear this first. Yeah, so we are expecting that this pipeline will create the zip files for each of the CSV files individually. So you can see get metadata has performed its job of fetching all the file names, and then inside for each we are having 4 instances of copy activity. So all of them are finished. Let's check the output. So you can see all the files from container 2 has been zipped into container output. Okay, and if I try to see the content, So you can see it has been encoded, which means it is actually the zip file, and the proper naming is also done. So let me go back here. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you like the content. Please hit on like button and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it yet. And please hit on bell icon to get notification whenever I add videos. Thank you.